Hey everyone, it's Steve from the garden. In today's video, I'm going to give you a quick update on my potato plants, but then we're going to go harvest some onions. Behind me, this is my pink lady apple tree. You can see the apples are now starting to size up. So hopefully we'll get our first harvest of apples from this tree this year. Anyways, let's get started. The sweet potato plants continue to fill in really nicely. There's lots of nice dense vegetation in here. And right now, it's not really making a difference whether it's got the trellis or not, although I do have plants that are starting to get above the trellis area. The regular potatoes have a kind of a potato jungle going on. Now the trellis is definitely helping them to stay upright, except for the plants that didn't make it within the trellis and they're flopping over. Now we're not really seeing much dieback yet, so it'll probably be like another month before these are ready for harvest. I do have some ideas for some improvements next year, in that I have like 10 feet between the supports. I think I really need to cut that in half and do like 5 foot with supports running in between them. Because we've had some strong winds that would come through and it kind of shift us around a little bit. So I think adding another level of support will help us out. The bees and that are enjoying this onion that I allowed to go to seed that was growing last year. You see they get all over this. There's some more bees in action over here. These are the yellow Spanish onions. They're still growing. This one's pretty small, but those are kind of like I'd consider them a medium size. But it's mainly the candy onions that are starting to flop over. So we're going to go ahead and harvest anything that has flopped over, and we'll take a look at it. Now I do have looks like two actually, bulbs that are starting to flower. So I'm going to have to separate them from everything else, so I use them first. Like here's another one that's starting to flower. So when I pull those, I put them off on the side. It doesn't really matter where I start pulling these from. So I'm just going to look for the ones that have flopped over like this. Just kind of pull that one out. It's a really nice size onion right there. It's the size of my hand. And this is like almost like softball size. And this is a really big one too. I mean, it's even bigger than the first one I just pulled. And I mean, just look at that. Now once I get all the onions pulled, I am going to go through and kind of weed the bed here, because it definitely needs some of that. Another large one. Now this one's more round than the other ones, but again, really nice size on that. Now here's a good example. Like this one's still going strong, the stem is still good, so I'm going to let that one go. But the one next to it, since that one's flopped over, I'll pull that out. More of a medium-sized one here. And it's flopped over. One's flopped over. Since these onion varieties have different storage lengths, like the candy onion is supposed to be good for 3 months, although I've stored it up to 6. I do kind of keep them separated when I put them into storage, just so that I can use the candy onions first since they have the shorter storage life. And I know all these are monster size. I'd say these are large, but they're not like jumbo. That one's maybe not jumbo, but it's getting closer. Something I want to look at before I harvest some of these is I want to look at how well the spacing worked out. Like if these are relatively large, and how much space is between them versus like say this one's extra big. Here a view from a different angle since we can get a better view of it. So like these are all 3 of them are quite large, but they still have enough space between them so they're able to grow the full size without interfering with each other. So that tells me that my spacing between each onion is working out. Okay, that does it as far as pulling candy onions for today. You know, I still have ones that are growing, so I'm just going to let them flop over naturally. I could just pull these now if I really wanted to, but I don't need the space immediately, so I'll let them just finish off on their own. A few of the Pattersons are also flopping over, so I might as well just go ahead and pull those too. Now the Pattersons don't get as big as the candy onions do. Since I'm going to be pulling the candy onions and Pattersons at the same time, at least the ones that flopped over, I will keep them physically separated as far as the curing process, so I know which is which. Some of these onions, as I was pulling them out, they really give that onion smell coming off of them, like if you're cutting them, which I don't get quite so much with the candy onions. But oh, look at that one's like a runt. I guess that stronger, softer smell is what helps them store longer. I had a comment this morning from Rick the gardener. He was complimenting me on the quality of the soil I have in these beds. And you can see this is nice loose soil here, but if you squeeze it, it holds together. And that's largely due to the leaves and the horse manure I use to amend these beds every fall. So as that material breaks down, it gives you that nice loamy soil for growing all your vegetables in. So here's all the candy onions I harvested today. Those are the two that were starting to flower. And I got everything else kind of laid out here in the sun, with the biggest ones over here, over on the end. I would have to weigh them to really know like which one's the exact biggest. I would say these are the biggest so far. You can see how big they are compared to my hands. And with these being kind of the runners up. This is all the Pattersons I harvested today. There's still a few in the beds that I haven't harvested yet because they haven't toppled over. This one's about the biggest. It's not as big as the largest candy onions, but it's still a good size. I did end up with a few small ones. I mean, this is probably the smallest one of all. That one's definitely small. This is what remains to be harvested. I got about a dozen and a half of the candy onions and I don't know, about 10 to 12 of the Pattersons. It's funny that this year the Pattersons pretty much finished up earlier than the candy onions, which has not been the case in previous years. And you can see I do have some weeds in here. So I'm going to have to go through and get all that cleaned up so I can plant the next thing for fall. I have several days where I don't have any rain in the forecast, so I'm going to leave the onions out in the sun so they can start curing and drying out. And then roughly 3 days, you know, provided again that the forecast doesn't change and we're going to get some rain, I'll start trimming the tops and I'll put them in the garage on those curing racks I set up. Behind me, this is my peach tree. Now we had a late cold spell where it got warm early and then got cold, and that kind of zapped most of the flowers on this tree. But I do have a few peaches that made it through, so we won't get skunked this year. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to answer them. And let me know how your onion harvest was going this year. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed, got something out of this, and we'll see you on the next one.